Rosa Mendez walked slowly through the empty hallways of Westfield High School. The clock on the wall showed 6:30 p.m. Most teachers and students had gone home hours ago. At 67 years old, Rosa had been cleaning these halls for almost 20 years now. Her gray hair was tied in a simple bun, and her hands showed signs of years of hard work. As she pushed her cleaning cart toward the math department, she hummed softly to herself. This was her favorite part of the school. While other janitors complained about cleaning the science labs or cafeteria, Rosa always asked to clean the math classrooms. No one ever questioned why. "Good evening, Mrs. Mendez," said Principal Cooper as he walked past her, briefcase in hand. He was one of the few staff members who knew her name. "Good evening, sir," Rosa replied with a small smile. She watched him leave through the main doors before continuing her work. The math hallway was quiet. Rosa stopped at room 237 first. She always followed the same order. It gave structure to her evenings. Inside, she began her routine, emptying trash cans, wiping desks, and cleaning the whiteboards. As she approached the whiteboard in room 237, she paused. The teacher had left complex equations covering the entire surface. Rosa stood there, studying them carefully. Her eyes moved from one symbol to the next. Without thinking, she reached for the eraser but stopped herself. There wasn't time to erase these yet. She wanted to understand them first. 20 minutes later, Rosa finally erased the board and moved to the next classroom. This happened every day. What no one at Westfield High knew was that Rosa Mendez had once been a promising mathematics student in her home country. Life had taken her on a different path, but her love for numbers never died. In room 241, she found a math textbook left behind by a student. She carefully picked it up and looked at the cover. Advanced Calculus. Rosa glanced around to make sure she was alone, then gently placed the book in her cart to return tomorrow, but not before she would spend the night studying its pages. At her small apartment that evening, Rosa sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. The apartment was clean but simple. A small TV sat in the corner, never used. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with second-hand mathematics books she had collected over the years. Rosa opened the borrowed textbook and took out her notebook. She began working through problems, her pencil moving quickly across the paper. This was her real life, not the one people saw at school. Here, alone at night, she was a mathematician, not just a janitor. Her neighbors sometimes wondered about the light that stayed on in her apartment until late hours. They'd assumed the old lady might have trouble sleeping. They never imagined she was solving differential equations and complex mathematical problems for fun. As midnight approached, Rosa finally closed the book. Tomorrow was another day of mopping floors and emptying trash cans. But for these few hours each night, she had been in her element. Mathematics had always been her first love, her true calling. She placed the textbook carefully in her bag to return it tomorrow. No one would ever know it had been borrowed. Just like no one knew that the quiet janitor who cleaned their classrooms understood every equation they wrote on those boards. Rosa turned off the light and went to bed, looking forward to tomorrow's mathematical discoveries hidden in the classrooms of Westfield High School. The next morning, Westfield High School welcomed a new teacher. Dr. James Harlow walked through the main entrance with confident steps. He carried an expensive leather briefcase and wore a tailored suit that made him stand out among the other teachers in their casual clothes. "Welcome to Westfield, Dr. Harlow," said Principal Cooper, shaking his hand firmly. "We're very excited to have someone with your credentials joining our mathematics department." "Thank you for the opportunity," Dr. Harlow replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm looking forward to bringing some real academic rigor to this school." Principal Cooper's smile faltered slightly. "Well, I think you'll find our students are quite bright." Of course," Dr. Harlow said dismissively. "Now, could you show me to my classroom?" As they walked down the hallway, students moved aside, watching the new teacher with curious eyes. Dr. Harlow had come from an elite university where he taught advanced mathematics. Taking a job at Westfield High was a step down for him, but after some problems at his previous position, he had few options. In the teacher's lounge, the math faculty gathered to meet their new colleague. "This is Sarah Miller. She teaches algebra LEI and pre-calculus," Principal Cooper introduced. "Ah, the basics," Dr. Harlow said with a nod that somehow made Sarah feel like her subjects were unimportant. The other teachers soon discovered that Dr. Harlow had this effect on everyone. By lunchtime, word had spread that the new math teacher thought very highly of himself and very little of everyone else. In his first class that afternoon, Dr. Harlow stood before his advanced placement calculus students. "I've reviewed the curriculum you've been following," he announced, "and I must say I'm disappointed. We'll need to accelerate quickly if any of you hope to truly understand higher mathematics." A girl in the front row raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, we've already covered everything in chapters 1 through 7. "Yes, but did you understand it?" Dr. Harlow asked with a smirk. "Let's find out." He turned to the whiteboard and wrote a complex equation that wasn't in their textbook. The students looked at each other nervously. "This is a simple application of what you claim to know," he said. "Who can solve it?" The room remained silent as students struggled with the unfamiliar problem. "Just as I thought," Dr. Harlow said, sounding almost pleased. "We have much work to do." By the end of the day, every student in Dr. Harlow's classes felt discouraged and confused. At the final bell, he wrote another difficult equation on the board. "Think about this until tomorrow. Perhaps one of you will surprise me," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it possible. After the students left, Dr. Harlow remained in his classroom, organizing his materials. He didn't notice when Rosa Mendez quietly entered with her cleaning cart an hour later. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I need to clean now." Dr. Harlow looked up, annoyed at the interruption. He barely glanced at the elderly janitor. "Fine, just don't touch the whiteboard. That equation stays up." Rosa nodded and began emptying the trash cans. Her eyes, however, kept moving to the complex equation on the board. She recognized it as a challenging differential equation that required multiple steps to solve. Dr. Harlow noticed her looking at the board and misinterpreted her interest. "It's mathematics," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Probably looks like random scribbles to you." Rosa said nothing as she continued cleaning, but there was a slight smile on her face that Dr. Harlow didn't see. Little did he know that this simple janitor had already begun solving his supposedly impossible equation in her head. Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Harlow established himself as the most difficult teacher at Westfield High School. Students dreaded his classes, where he would often call them disappointments when they couldn't solve his extremely challenging problems. Other teachers began to dislike him too, as he made comments about their simple teaching methods during staff meetings. Every day after school, Dr. Harlow would write a new, complicated equation on his whiteboard before leaving. And every evening, Rosa would study these equations while cleaning his classroom. She never touched them, but her mind worked through each step as she mopped the floors or wiped the desks. On Wednesday afternoon, Dr. Harlow was having a particularly bad day. His morning class had performed poorly on a quiz, and the principal had spoken to him about complaints from parents. He sat at his desk after school, frustrated and angry, when Rosa entered with her cleaning cart. "Not now," he snapped. "Can't you see I'm working?" Rosa nodded politely. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll come back later." "No, wait," Dr. Harlow said suddenly, a mean idea forming in his mind. He needed someone to take out his frustration on, and the old janitor seemed like an easy target. "Since you're here, you can clean. Just stay away from my desk." Rosa quietly began her work, emptying trash cans while Dr. Harlow watched her with narrowed eyes. He noticed how she kept glancing at the whiteboard where yesterday's equation still remained. "Do you find mathematics interesting, Mrs.?" he asked, realizing he didn't even know her name. "Mendez. Rosa Mendez," she answered softly. "Yes, the numbers are interesting." Dr. Harlow laughed unkindly. "Interesting? I doubt you understand any of it." Just then, 3 other teachers appeared at the classroom door. They had come to ask Dr. Harlow about the upcoming department meeting, but stopped when they heard his tone. In fact, Dr. Harlow continued, standing up and walking to the whiteboard. "Let me show you something really interesting." He erased yesterday's equation and began writing a new one, much more complex than anything he had written before. It filled half the board with symbols, numbers, and variables. "This," he said with a smug smile, "is a special type of differential equation used in advanced physics. PhD students struggle with this. I wonder what you make of it." He held out the marker to Rosa, his eyes gleaming with mean amusement. The teachers at the door watched uncomfortably. Sarah Miller, the algebra teacher, was about to interrupt when something unexpected happened. Rosa set down her cleaning cloth, wiped her hands on her uniform, and took the marker. The room fell completely silent. "You want me to solve this?" she asked quietly. Dr. Harlow couldn't hide his surprise, but quickly recovered. "By all means," he said with a mocking bow. "Show us your mathematical genius, Mrs. Mendez." The other teachers exchanged worried glances. This public humiliation of a staff member, especially an elderly one, was crossing a line. Yet none of them expected what happened next. Rosa studied the equation for about 30 seconds, her eyes moving slowly across the board. Then, without hesitation, she began to write. Her hand moved confidently, adding symbols and numbers below Dr. Harlow's equation. Step by step, she worked through the problem. Dr. Harlow's smile faded as he watched. The three teachers in the doorway moved closer, their eyes widening in disbelief. Even more staff members began gathering as word quickly spread down the hallway. Rosa worked silently for about 5 minutes. No one in the room spoke or moved. When she finally put down the marker, the whiteboard showed a perfect, step-by-step solution to the supposedly impossible equation. She turned around, handed the marker back to Dr. Harlow, and simply said, "Is that correct? Or did I make a mistake?" Dr. Harlow stared at the board, his face growing pale as he checked her work. The solution was not only correct, it was elegant. She had used an approach he hadn't even considered. The silence in the room was broken by Sarah Miller, who began to clap. Other teachers joined in, their applause echoing in the classroom as Rosa, looking embarrassed by the attention, picked up her cloth and returned to cleaning as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The next morning, Westfield High School was buzzing with talk about what had happened in Dr. Harlow's classroom. Students whispered in hallways, and teachers discussed it in the staff room. The story of Rosa Mendez, the elderly janitor who had solved an impossible equation, spread quickly through the school. Dr. Harlow arrived earlier than usual. His face was tight with embarrassment and confusion. He went straight to his classroom and closed the door, avoiding eye contact with everyone he passed. Inside, he sat at his desk and tried to make sense of what had happened the day before. Principal Cooper knocked on his door around 8:30 a.m. "Good morning, James," he said, stepping inside. "I think we need to talk about yesterday." Dr. Harlow sighed. "I suppose everyone knows by now." "Yes, they do," Principal Cooper said, sitting down across from him. "But I'm not here to criticize you. I'm curious about Mrs. Mendez. What exactly happened?" Dr. Harlow explained the event, trying to minimize his own poor behavior while emphasizing his shock at Rosa's mathematical abilities. "I've been thinking about it all night," he admitted. "That equation would challenge most university professors. How could a janitor solve it so easily?" Principal Cooper looked thoughtful. "Perhaps there's more to Rosa Mendez than we know. I've been principal here for 8 years, and I realize I know almost nothing about her personally. She's always been reliable, quiet, and keeps to herself." At that moment, Sarah Miller joined them, knocking lightly on the open door. "Sorry to interrupt, but I did some asking around this morning," she said. "One of our custodial staff mentioned that Rosa used to be a teacher in Argentina before coming to the United States about 30 years ago. That's all he knew." The three educators looked at each other, surprised by this small piece of information that changed everything they thought they knew about the quiet janitor. "I think we should talk to her," Principal Cooper decided, not to put her on the spot, but to understand her story better. Later that day, they invited Rosa to join them in the principal's office during her break. She arrived looking nervous, her hands clasped tightly in front of her worn uniform. "Am I in trouble?" she asked softly. "About yesterday." "Not at all," Principal Cooper assured her quickly. "We're just curious about your background in mathematics. Your skills are extraordinary, Rosa." Rosa looked down at her hands, seeming unsure about sharing her story. Finally, she began to speak. "In Argentina, many years ago, I was studying to become a mathematics professor," she explained, her voice gaining strength as she continued. "I was at the top of my class at the University of Buenos Aires. My professors said I had special talent." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Then the military took control of our government. My father was a journalist who wrote against them. They came for my family one night. My parents told me to run. I escaped with only what I could carry in one small bag. My university papers, my identity documents. Everything was left behind. The three educators listened in stunned silence as Rosa told them how she had arrived in America as a refugee, unable to prove her education or credentials. I tried to continue my studies here, but I had no money, no papers, and my English was very poor then, she explained. I found work cleaning offices, then schools. I needed to eat, to have a place to live. But you never lost your love for mathematics, Sarah said softly. Rosa's face brightened. Never. I read books when I can find them. I study at night. Sometimes I borrow textbooks from classrooms for a day or two. She looked embarrassed. I always return them, I promise. Dr. Harlow, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Mrs. Mendez, your solution yesterday wasn't just correct. It was brilliant. You used an approach I've only seen in advanced research papers. Rosa smiled for the first time since entering the room. Mathematics has been my friend for 50 years, she said simply. When everything else was taken from me, numbers remained true. As the bell rang signaling the end of the period, Principal Cooper stood up. Rosa, I think we have much more to discuss. Would you be willing to meet with us again tomorrow? Rosa nodded, looking both worried and hopeful about what might come next. Word about Rosa's mathematical abilities spread quickly throughout Westfield High School. Students would smile and wave at her in the hallways now, where before they had barely noticed her existence. Teachers greeted her by name, and some even stopped to chat about their day. This sudden attention made Rosa uncomfortable. For 20 years, she had been practically invisible, and she had grown used to that life. The day after her meeting with Principal Cooper and the math teachers, Rosa arrived at work to find a small group waiting for her in the staff room. Principal Cooper stood with Dr. Harlow, Sarah Miller, and two people she didn't recognize, a woman in a formal business suit and an older man with kind eyes and silver hair. Good afternoon, Rosa, Principal Cooper said warmly. Thank you for coming a bit early today. We have some people who would like to meet you. Rosa clutched her purse tightly, feeling nervous. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, the principal assured her. This is Dr. Elena Ramirez from the State Education Department and Professor Thomas Wilson from Westridge University's Mathematics Department. The woman stepped forward, extending her hand. Mrs. Mendez, it's an honor to meet you. Dr. Harlow has shared what happened the other day. I must say, I'm quite impressed. Rosa shook her hand hesitantly. Thank you, but I don't understand why this is important. Professor Wilson smiled warmly. Mrs. Mendez, the equation you solved would challenge most of my graduate students. When Dr. Harlow contacted me about what happened, I was intrigued. He shared your solution with me, and your approach was both elegant and innovative. Rosa looked at Dr. Harlow with surprise. The arrogant teacher actually looked somewhat embarrassed as he nodded. Please, sit down, Principal Cooper said, gesturing to a chair. Once they were all seated, Dr. Ramirez explained the reason for their visit. Mrs. Mendez, we believe your mathematical talents are being wasted in your current position. No offense to the important work of school maintenance staff, she added quickly. What we're proposing, Professor Wilson continued, is an opportunity for you to take some assessment tests to formally evaluate your mathematical knowledge. Depending on the results, there might be possibilities for you to use your skills in a different capacity. Rosa sat very still, trying to process what she was hearing. Tests? But why? I am just a janitor. No, Rosa, Sarah Miller said gently. You're a mathematician who happens to be working as a janitor right now. There's a big difference. Rosa looked down at her hands, weathered from years of cleaning chemicals and hard work. Hands that had once written complex equations with ease in university classrooms back in Argentina. Hands that still worked through math problems at night on cheap notebooks from the dollar store. What kind of tests? She finally asked. Standard mathematics proficiency assessments, Professor Wilson explained. If you're willing, we could administer them next week at the university. It would take about 3 hours. And if I pass these tests? Rosa asked. Dr. Ramirez leaned forward. That would depend on how well you do. There might be opportunities for teaching, research assistance, or further education if you're interested. Rosa felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Fear, hope, excitement, and doubt all swirled together in her mind. For decades, she had accepted her life as it was, finding joy in the small moments when she could reconnect with mathematics. The idea that her life might change now, at 67, seemed impossible. I don't know, she said softly. Dr. Harlow, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Mrs. Mendez, I owe you an apology for my behavior, but I also owe you my gratitude. You reminded me of something I had forgotten as a teacher, that true mathematical talent can appear anywhere, and it deserves respect and nurturing wherever it's found. Rosa looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Will you at least think about it? Principal Cooper asked. Rosa nodded slowly. Yes, I will think about it. But now, I should start my work. The classrooms won't clean themselves. As she stood to leave, Professor Wilson handed her his card. Whatever you decide, Mrs. Mendez, I would be honored to discuss mathematics with you sometime. Rosa took the card carefully, as if it were made of glass, and slipped it into her pocket. As she walked to get her cleaning cart, her mind was already racing with possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine in decades. The following Monday, Rosa sat nervously in Professor Wilson's office at Westridge University. The campus was beautiful, with tall trees and old brick buildings that reminded her of her university in Argentina. She wore her best clothes, a simple blue dress she usually saved for church, and a cardigan that her granddaughter had given her last Christmas. Are you comfortable, Mrs. Mendez? Professor Wilson asked, placing a stack of papers on the desk. Can I get you some water or coffee before we begin? Water, please, Rosa answered, her mouth feeling dry. She hadn't taken a test in over 40 years. What if she failed? What if everyone realized she wasn't special after all? As if reading her thoughts, Professor Wilson smiled kindly. Try not to worry. This isn't a pass or fail situation. We just want to understand your knowledge and abilities better. Dr. Ramirez from the State Education Department sat in a corner, watching with interest. Dr. Harlow had also come, sitting quietly by the window. His presence surprised Rosa, but she appreciated that he no longer looked at her with mockery or disrespect. You'll have 3 hours for these assessments, Professor Wilson explained, handing her the first set of papers. Take your time, and don't worry if you can't answer everything. Some of these questions are very advanced. Rosa nodded, picked up the pencil, and began. The first problems were basic algebra and calculus, things she could solve easily. As she worked through them, her nervousness began to fade. The familiar comfort of mathematics embraced her like an old friend. The problems grew more difficult as she continued. Some required knowledge of theories she had never formally studied. For these, she relied on her innate understanding of mathematical principles and the self-education she had pursued over decades. The three educators watched with amazement as Rosa worked steadily through problems that would challenge most graduate students. She didn't rush, taking time to think and occasionally smiling when she found an elegant solution. There was no sign of the timid janitor now. In her element, Rosa showed complete confidence. 2.5 hours later, she set down her pencil and looked up. I finished, she said simply. The three educators exchanged surprised glances. Professor Wilson collected her papers. Would you mind waiting in the lounge next door while we review these? Martha will show you where it is. While Rosa waited, sipping tea in the faculty lounge, the three educators reviewed her work with growing excitement. This is extraordinary, Professor Wilson said, pointing to her solution for a particularly complex problem. She's using approaches I'd only seen in theoretical research papers. And here, she developed her own method for this one. Dr. Ramirez nodded. I've never seen anything like it, especially from someone with no formal advanced education. Dr. Harlow studied Rosa's work carefully. The way she thinks, it's so different from how we teach mathematics. More intuitive, more creative. After 30 minutes, they called Rosa back into the office. She entered hesitantly, trying to read their expressions. Please sit down, Mrs. Mendez, Professor Wilson said, his eyes bright with excitement. I don't quite know how to say this, but your results are nothing short of remarkable. Rosa sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Ramirez explained, that you have mathematical abilities that far exceed most PhD-level mathematicians. Your understanding of complex theories, your problem-solving approaches, they're exceptional. In some cases, Professor Wilson added, "You've developed your own methods that are more efficient than standard approaches. That's not just knowledge, Mrs. Mendez, that's genuine mathematical creativity." Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. After decades of cleaning classrooms where others taught mathematics, someone was finally recognizing what she had always known in her heart: that she belonged in those classrooms as a teacher, not just as someone who emptied the trash cans. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. The three educators looked at each other, and it was Dr. Harlow who answered, his voice sincere. "That depends on what you want, Mrs. Mendez. But I think it's safe to say that your days of being just a janitor at Westfield High are over, if that's what you choose." 2 weeks after taking the assessment tests, Rosa stood outside Principal Cooper's office, waiting for a meeting that would determine her future. She had continued her normal cleaning duties during this time, but everything felt different now. Teachers smiled at her in the hallways, and students occasionally asked her to help with their math homework during lunch breaks. The door opened, and Principal Cooper invited her inside. Dr. Harlow was already there, along with Professor Wilson, Dr. Ramirez, and Sarah Miller. The serious looks on their faces made Rosa nervous. "Please, sit down," Principal Cooper said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We have a lot to discuss today." Rosa sat stiffly, her hands clutching her purse. "Am I still in trouble about solving that equation?" The adults in the room exchanged smiles. "Not at all," Dr. Ramirez said. "In fact, we've been working on something very special for the past 2 weeks." Principal Cooper placed a folder on the table. "Rosa, after reviewing your test results and discussing your situation, we've developed a proposal we'd like to share with you." He opened the folder and handed Rosa a document. "This is an offer for a new position here at Westfield High School." Rosa took the paper with trembling hands and began to read. The words swam before her eyes. "Mathematics teaching assistant and part-time faculty member" jumped out at her. Below was a salary figure that was nearly twice what she earned as a janitor. "I don't understand," she said, looking up. "You want me to teach? But I have no degree, no teaching certificate." "That's where the state education department comes in," Dr. Ramirez explained. "Based on your exceptional test results and Dr. Wilson's evaluation, we can grant you a provisional teaching certificate under our specialized knowledge pathway program. It's rare, but we make exceptions for individuals with extraordinary abilities." Meanwhile, Professor Wilson added, "Westridge University is offering you a special scholarship program to formally complete your mathematics degree while you work. You'll attend classes 2 evenings a week." Rosa looked down at the papers again, hardly daring to believe what was happening. After 40 years of cleaning classrooms, she was being offered the chance to teach in them instead. "But what about my cleaning job?" she asked. "Who will take care of the classrooms?" "The school will hire another custodian," Principal Cooper assured her. "Your new schedule would be half-time teaching assistant duties and half-time pursuing your degree." Dr. Harlow, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "Mrs. Mendez, your mathematical knowledge is wasted on cleaning floors. The students need someone like you, someone who understands not just the mechanics of mathematics, but its beauty and creativity." Sarah Miller nodded in agreement. "Just yesterday, 3 students who were struggling in Dr. Harlow's class told me how you explained a difficult concept to them during lunch period. They'd actually understood it after talking with you for 10 minutes. Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. The dream she had abandoned decades ago, to teach mathematics, to share her love of numbers with young minds, was suddenly within reach again. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "What if I can't teach properly?" "You won't fail," Professor Wilson said confidently. "I've seen how you think, how you approach problems. You have a natural gift for explaining complex ideas simply." "And we'll all help you," Sarah added. "You won't be alone." Principal Cooper gave her a kind smile. "You don't have to decide right now, Rosa. Take the weekend to think about it." But Rosa didn't need the weekend. The decision was already made in her heart. "I accept," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I accept your offer." The room broke into applause and congratulations. As handshakes and smiles were exchanged, Rosa thought about how a single moment, Dr. Harlow's attempt to humiliate her with an impossible equation, had completely changed the path of her life. "When would I start?" she asked. "How about next Monday?" Principal Cooper suggested. We can begin with you assisting in Dr. Harlow's advanced mathematics classes. Dr. Harlow nodded, the irony of the situation not lost on anyone in the room. The teacher who had tried to mock her would now be working alongside her as a colleague. Rosa Mendez, who had spent decades hiding her mathematical genius while cleaning classrooms, would finally step to the front of one. 6 months later, Rosa Mendez stood at the front of room 241, writing equations on the whiteboard. The classroom was full of students watching her with interest and respect. At 68 years old, she was now the most popular mathematics teacher at Westfield High School. So you see, Rose had explained, turning to face the class, there are always multiple ways to solve a problem. The textbook shows you one path, but your mind can discover others. A boy in the back raised his hand. Mrs. Mendez, is it true that you used to be the janitor here? Rosa smiled. She had heard this question many times now. Yes, Miguel. For almost 20 years, I cleaned these same classrooms. Life takes unexpected turns sometimes. The students looked at each other, impressed by their teacher's unusual journey. What had started as a part-time teaching assistant position had quickly grown into something more. Rosa's natural ability to explain difficult concepts made her invaluable to struggling students. After class ended, Rosa gathered her books and walked to the teacher's lounge for lunch. The room that had once been off-limits to her as a janitor was now her daily gathering place with colleagues. Rosa, Sarah Miller waved from a table where she sat with Dr. Harlow. Come join us. Rosa set her tray down and took a seat. Dr. Harlow, once so arrogant, had changed dramatically over the past months. Working with Rosa had humbled him in ways no one expected. How was your advanced class this morning? He asked. Very good, Rosa replied. 3 students found different solutions to the same problem. It was beautiful to watch their minds work. Dr. Harlow nodded. I've noticed that you never tell them there's only one right way. That's different from how I was taught. Mathematics is not just about finding answers, Rosa said, her eyes bright with passion. It's about discovering paths. Sometimes the most unexpected path leads to the most elegant solution. Sarah smiled. Just like your path, Rosa. Who would have thought that at 67, your life would take such a turn? Rosa looked thoughtful. In my first country, there is a saying, God writes straight with crooked lines. My journey to teaching wasn't direct, but perhaps it was the path I needed. After lunch, Rosa walked to her next class. In the hallway, she passed the janitor's closet where her cleaning cart had once been stored. Manuel, the new janitor, was inside organizing supplies. Good afternoon, Mrs. Mendez, he said with a smile. Good afternoon, Manuel. How are you today? Very well. My son got an A on his math test. He says it's because of the extra help you gave him last week. Rosa beamed with pride. Carlos is a smart boy. He just needed to believe in himself. As she continued down the hall, Rosa noticed the trophy case where a new addition had been placed. It was a framed copy of the impossible equation she had solved 6 months ago, with a small plaque that read, Never judge a book by its cover, WHS Mathematics Department. In the afternoon, Rosa attended her own classes at Westridge University. At 68, she was by far the oldest student, but her professors were often amazed by her insights. She was on track to receive her bachelor's degree in mathematics by the end of the year, a dream deferred for over 40 years. That evening, as Rosa packed up her books to go home, Principal Cooper stopped by her classroom. Rosa, I have some exciting news, he said. The school board has approved a full-time teaching position for you next year, and they've agreed to name our annual Mathematics Achievement Award after you, the Rosa Mendez Excellence in Mathematics Award. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Principal Cooper replied. Your story has already taught our students something more valuable than any equation, that it's never too late to pursue your passion, and that true talent can't be hidden forever. As Rosa walked to the bus stop that evening, she passed the janitor's closet one last time. She paused briefly, remembering the woman who had quietly cleaned these halls for 20 years, solving equations in her mind while mopping floors. That woman was gone now, replaced by a teacher, a student, and a mathematician finally living her dream. The impossible equation that Dr. Harlow had meant as mockery had become the first line in a new chapter of Rosa Mendez's extraordinary life.